We've got quite a bit to talk about this week. We'll go in depth in a few things, but first up we talk about USA, Seattle in the state of Washington on the west coast. It's ultra-liberal state, especially on the coastal areas, same with Oregon and of course California. The Antifa, Black Lives Matter, have taken over part of that city. 6 city blocks of downtown, pushed everybody out, and renamed it CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And they've decided no police, everyone's going to just live how they want to live. And of course, they'll run out of food, and they've been stealing food from each other. Any white people in there have to pay $10 to a just give $10 to a black person. The mayor, the gutless mayor of Seattle, has turned around and said, what did she say? She said it's going to be a summer of love, and she's done nothing. She's given up part of their city. Crazy. Mayor Jenny Durkin. Okay, so there you go. Democratic state. The ultra liberals just hand parts of the city over. Wonder what those business owners inside that 6 blocks are thinking. Judging from what I've seen on the news and stuff, everything's spray painted, everything's been looted. It's just a mess. It's going to cost millions and millions and millions to get tied up when they finally get rid of these guys. I see old Donny Boy, he's keeping out of it for now. Wise decision. Gets a bit messy when the federals get involved in a state's affairs. But the problem is the governor doesn't want to do much either. In fact, he keeps saying he doesn't know anything about it. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I'll put a link down below where some bikie gangs, obviously patriots, have said they're going to go up there and clean it out. So that'll be interesting. Watch the soy lattes go flying then when they get there. So that'll be interesting to watch. But it's a pretty big thing to happen, you know. 6 city blocks, basically no police. They abandoned the police station. It's incredible, amazing. Even their police force, I hate to say it, but I imagine to be a police chief there, you'd have to be. Well, I don't know if you'd be interested in enforcement. I know in America they have a system where chiefs of police are actually voted in by the constituents, and I imagine you'd have to be pretty liberal to actually get voted in as a police chief there, and that's probably why they've just abandoned it. They all seem pretty happy about it. It's amazing. Anyway, and of course the Black Lives Matter movement protests spread around the world, including New Zealand. And of course, once that got here, somebody else pops up on my news feed again. The Gollum, and I apologise for getting the name wrong, but it's not easy, eh? Gollum Goldriz, the Greens lady again. She wants the Richard Seddon statue removed from in front of Parliament. King Dick wants him gone. Or maybe because it's a nickname, I don't know. Patriarchy. Anyway, she wants him removed. And we've got Captain John Hamilton. The city of Hamilton was named after him. The council's already capitulated there and had him removed. But Richard Seddon, let's talk about these statues and things. You know, they're a part of our history, and if you're going to sit there and go, right, let's check and make sure every statue, every painting, every park name, every city name, let's make sure that they fit with what we stand for now. And you know, who's going to, I mean, everybody's got skeletons in their closet. Who's going to sit with a magnifying glass, go through all these people, and then decide? Who decides who's pure enough to have their own statue? Who decides? You know, they say history is written by the victors, but in this case, of course, most of these statues were put up in the Victorian era, which was very well known. I mean, Victorians, the first thing they did was put a statue up. So that's why there's a lot of them. And of course, so now people are saying, well, you know, we don't like this guy, we don't like that guy. Now I had a little bit of a dig into old Captain John Hamilton, and turns out he was in the New Zealand Wars, one of them, for a very short time actually. He led the assault on Gate Pa, and as he crossed over the parapet, he took a musket ball to the head and was killed instantly. So old John Hamilton died for Queen and country, but that was the end of that. And I can't find anything else he did. But for some reason, for doing that, he's this terrible guy that's been demonized and want to get rid of him. Now, you want to read a little bit about Gate Pa, and it's an interesting story, the whole Gate Pa thing. So now I'll put a link down below, and I'll talk about this guy later on. But the New Zealand pioneer history is fascinating, and I recommend anybody who's remotely interested in history, don't have to look any further than Aotearoa. It's very, very interesting. So of course there was many battles and wars. There wasn't just one continuous war, in case you didn't know, and they were tribal, and except for one, the Kingite movement, the Kingatanga, they did in the Waikato, and they did manage to form a big alliance there of tribes, but the rest of them was all tribal, individual tribes, or tribes helping out other tribes if they're asked, and some tribes sided with the British. So Gate Pa, there was a chief that was more in the south from Tauranga. He was more to the southeast, and he was everybody else was getting all these battles with the British, and he wasn't getting any battles. And now, of course, our Māori, very as a warrior race, it's part of being a man, sort of thing, and it's they hold in high esteem. Warriors have huge mana, and so this guy here wanted to get some more mana. He was missing out, so he sent a messenger to the British at Tauranga and said, "Look, hey, here's a map. Here's where we are. I'll get some of my boys to cut you a track, and we'll leave supplies along the way, so that when you get here, you're not too tired to fight." And so this is a sort of politeness and that these guys had, and you know, a Maori chief is you know, he's a chief for good reason, and so he invited the British to come and do battle, and they ignored him. They wouldn't go. And so he thought about it for a while. Thought about it, and he thought, oh well, you know what I do? I'll go closer, and so they can't ignore me. So he built that pa at Gate Pa, right on the doorstep of Tauranga, so they couldn't ignore him. And of course, eventually they didn't ignore him, and they came and assaulted it. But I don't see any record of John Hamilton. You know, he wasn't involved in any massacres or anything like that. He led the assault, and I presume that was because he was the highest ranking field officer there at the time. But doesn't seem to be much of a villain, except for the fact that he fought for the British. Anyway, so we've got plenty of statues around, and University of Otago did a count up, and surprise, surprise, found 87% of all the statues in New Zealand of male white men. Well, let's face it, back in Victorian New Zealand, you know, the settler times, I don't think there would have been too many women fighting. So, and you know, you got to think of it in that time. In that time, the British were just flat out colonizing New Zealand, which means subjugating the native population, ripping them off, doing dodgy deals, stealing, confiscating land. Land confiscations and that were real, no doubt about that. And the New Zealand Company, if they were operating today, those guys would all be in jail for fraud. Okay, so there is absolutely legitimate grievance, and we need to get this tidied up so we can all move on together. But we're not going to be able to undo the fact that New Zealand was colonised. So we need to work it out, get through it, and move ahead together. You know, New Zealand's such a rich country. Look at the culture we have. Our Māori culture is fantastic. I couldn't imagine New Zealand without it. If this was just two empty islands and the British came and settled here, what would our culture be? Beer and fish and chips. That'd be it. So we've got this colourful, beautiful culture in New Zealand that we should all embrace. And it's sad to see this, but I just can't understand how removing a statue is going to fix it. You can say, oh, well, it's in my face all the time. Well, then removing it's not going to fix it. You need to destroy it, right? Destroy the statues if they're that offensive. But that's been done before in 1920s Germany. It's been done before. And then say, okay, where do you stop? Well, let's go and look at the books as well. And decide which books people are allowed to read, which books are suitable, which fit the narrative that I like of history. Okay. Now we're speaking of books, and I did mention the guy before. There's a guy called James Cowan, and he wrote 3 volumes in the 20s, all about the New Zealand Wars and some aspects of pioneer life, settler life. Now this guy was born and raised with Maoris. He spoke fluent Māori. And in these books, he actually got to interview some of the survivors of both sides, but mostly Māori, from some of the battles. And of course, he writes with a slightly different perspective from us now, but in the 1920s. But he not only wrote about the battles and spoke to people that were in the battles, he actually describes in good detail the lead up, what was happening before the battle started, why that was a battle, and so quite in depth. And I highly recommend anybody who's interested in New Zealand history, that's something to read. So his name's James Cowan. I'll put a link below to his Wikipedia entry there, and you can see a bit more about him. Amazing guy. Anyway, where do you stop? You know, somebody said, oh, well, let's put these statues into a museum. People go and see them if they want. Well, they still exist. So today you're happy with that, but tomorrow somebody else might be offended that they still exist, and even if they're in a museum, that's not good enough. I say the part of our history, let's leave them there, and let's turn it into a positive. So we have our Alpine Trail and our geothermal trail in North Island for tourists and stuff. What do we make a New Zealand history trail? You imagine rocking up to one of these big monuments and having some good detail on a signboard nearby that tells you from both sides what happened, what their thinking was. Totally objective, rather than playing a narrative. People can decide for themselves. I mean, nobody's perfect. There's certainly, while Maori were fighting for their own land and fighting for the injustices that they were going through, there was definitely bad stuff done on both sides. Wasn't the aspects were not pretty at all. But anyway, why not make a trail out of it? We can call it Trail of Tears or whatever you like. But you imagine being able to go around and it'll get tourists into some more of these smaller, more remote areas, smaller towns as well. A lot of the battles were obviously on the frontier, not in downtown Auckland. Very interesting. I think would be fantastic. Imagine that. People actually learning about what happened and why things happened. And these statues, you think of them as being a history markers. Okay, they mark a moment in history as something that happened in New Zealand's history. That's what I think we should do. What do you think? Put it down in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear what people think about the old statues. Definitely don't think we should get rid of them. Other news from this week. It's been leaked out of the Royal Commission that the Christchurch gunman, the police failed to do proper background check on him, majorly. And they cited a lack of resources, but they basically did not follow protocol or the law, and allegedly only got a referee character reference off a couple of guys off the internet in a chat room, and nobody from his family either. So disappointing to hear. I'm probably not surprised. I just think if that guy hadn't got hold of all that stuff and did what he did, government wouldn't have spent how much ever they spent, was 100 something million on buying back guns that they didn't need to buy back. So that was a complete waste of time and money, all over one little stuff up. And 240,000 people paid for that. Well, we all paid for it financially, but 240,000 gun license holders are going through the ringer now, and it hasn't finished yet. So I was going through my newsfeed the other day, and I can't believe what I saw. Talk about 1984, and we harp on about 1984. This is the week of books. Another book I tell you to read, George Orwell's 1984. Okay, because that's happening right now in New Zealand. It's happening. So I read a piece, I saw a picture, bit of graphic art there, and it turns out it's getting slapped around all over the country. Bus stops, who knows where else, in public. Now, apart from the side that it was a completely plagiarized design of this guy, it just, it's just propaganda. Yeah, glorious leader. Now, I must point out that the art and the little project of getting that put all around the country wasn't done by her official office at all. It's more like what we call some fanboy come up with it himself and did it. So it's actually not completely, it's not actually attached to her office at all. But it just goes to show you, even the sheeple begins completely brainwashed. Like I say, 1984 is happening now. Our Minister of Health dropped the ball again, or somebody's dropped the ball. 2 women coming back from England on somebody passing away, and they came back. Supposedly were in isolation for 6 days. One had a cough, and they turned them loose without even testing them after 6 days, and they drove from Auckland to Wellington. But they didn't stop anywhere on the way. Must have had a big fuel tank, eh? Anyway, both of them positive. Let's just hope that that nobody's picked that up from them anywhere in their travels. But they're now safely seconded away in Wellington. But that's disappointing. All that pain and work we've done to pause the virus. It just goes just a good reminder there, showing us that it's actually paused. It hasn't stopped. As soon as we open the borders again, we're back at risk, and of course the government will have to assess the risk and mitigating factors of letting people through, and how they're going to handle that. But not a good start when there was only a trickle coming, and they're already blowing it. So anyway, I think we should embrace our history, own it. Yeah, it's easy for me to say. I'm just a parkyard boy, you know, but let's own our past, and move on together. And so, what can you and I do about BLM and racism and stuff? My dear mother always told me, treat everybody as you would like to be treated yourself. That's all you got to do. Just treat everyone with dignity, treat everyone the same as you treat anybody else. Pretty simple, really. But the one thing in the way, of course, is human nature. Okay, so anyway, that's about it for this week. Made it short and sweet, but lots to think about. Check out James Cohen. Amazing. I found his books amazing. And the history of New Zealand, and that's pre-settlement and European settlement and after. Fascinating. There's some amazing stories, things that have happened in New Zealand, and who knows, maybe right under your nose, around the corner from your house. something amazing happened. You never know unless you find out. Go and have a dig around to find out. Anyway, take care of each other. Stay safe. Ka kite no.